howdy to everyone out there listening. This is Taylor Ham, GigEm247.com, bringing you all a special pre-signing day podcast. Worked really hard to set up 3 excellent guests for the next hour or so. The first one I'm going to be bringing on is former Texas A&M Director of Recruiting under Mike Sherman, none other than Jeff Wood. For a good 45 minutes, we hit on an array of topics. He takes us what it's like to be inside of a national signing day war room, get his experiences under Coach Sherman and working a little bit under Kevin Sumlin as well. It's can't miss stuff for a good hour. My second guest will be Director of National Recruiting for 24/7 Sports, and as JC Shurburtt, we talk about the rise of Myles Garrett to that #1 overall prospect position for 24/7 Sports. We'll also talk about the development of Kyle Allen since he was a sophomore, something that JC has been very involved with. Also talk about the Texas A&M class overall, how it compares to some of the other classes nationally. My final guest will be Shreveport Woodlawn head coach Jerwin Wilson. He gives us his scouting report on Donovan Wilson, takes us through that last week of Donovan's recruitment that led to that breaking news that GigEm247 had on Saturday when Donovan flipped from Utah to Texas A&M. Our last part of our conversation will involve talking about 2 of his 2015 studs coming through the ranks, and that's cornerback Henry Black, who attended Texas A&M's first junior day, and of course top 247 defensive tackle TD Moten, who's been very outspoken on Twitter since Donovan's commitment to Texas A&M about possibly joining him in Aggieland. So an hour long of great conversation and good content for you all. Hope you enjoy it. Without further ado, we're going to bring on Jeff Wood. All right, our first guest up on the GigEm247 Pre-Signing Day podcast is none other than former Director of Recruiting under Coach Sherman, Jeff Wood. Jeff, welcome to our podcast, man. How you doing? What are you up to nowadays, man?
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks for having me on, and appreciate this opportunity to talk about some football. It's been a couple of years since I've been at football at A&M, and definitely there's a lot needed. I miss it, and so right now I'm in my final semester at the University of Houston getting my MBA, and so it's a little bit different than what I was doing a couple of years ago. And so used to watch high school and junior college game tape, and now I'm looking at Excel spreadsheets. So a little bit different.
Absolutely. I wanted to get everyone involved in what you did day to day at Texas A&M as a Director of Recruiting under Coach Sherman. Kind of take us through some of the responsibilities, maybe your daily routine, to just get everyone informed of how involved you really were.
Sure. Well, basically, what I was in charge of was really looking at both high school and junior college potential recruits, and what I would do is basically break down usually game tape of guys that we highlighted from coaching going out on the road, and identifying players, and say, hey, Jeff, will you please look at this guy, break down 4 or 5 games, and let's make a highlight of them. And so that was kind of my daily duty, main duty. Is so I try to get around 10 players a day cut, and so it was a long days sometimes. I mean, because some of these, in the old days, before there was the system called Huddle, it was I had to get a bunch of different from DVDs that were sent in by players and coaches, and then aggregate that with XOS systems, and so it was a long, arduous process. And so when Huddle came along, it just completely changed my life. It was just everything was on one central station, and it made cutting players' tapes and highlights just so much easier. So I could get, instead of 10 done a day, you usually get done 15 to 20 people. So it was a much needed and much appreciated software that was brought out. But basically I looked at kind of highlights and kind of gave an initial analysis of each player. Communicate with the coaches, whether it be the position coach or the recruiting area coach, and tell them what I saw, and then I'd bring it to either the offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator, and they would look at it as well. And if they approved it, they would go through to Coach Sherman. And so it's kind of like a checks and balance system. So it has to be approved by the initial And so it was a great check and balance system where everyone knew what was going on each and every day. We offered this guy, we didn't offer that guy, and here's where we are in the process. And so it was a great deal to make sure that we were all on the same page. But kind of the final thing I was doing was I kept up with correspondence between some of the coaches and the recruits. And what I mean by that is that Facebook has become a huge platform for communication, and almost all the players have a Facebook account, and so some of these coaches are not the best at typing, and so what I would do is I'd print out a conversation, give to the coaches, say here's what they've said, and they write something down, and I would type it back to them, and so it was like a kind of intermediary between that. So it was interesting to see the exchanges between the coaches and the players.
No doubt. Now Twitter's become big too. Just following them following you back, and being able to send a DM like an instant text message. So.
Right. Yeah. I think that Coach Sumlin has really done a great job with his Twitter account with the when he gets recruits committed. I think that's a great deal. I think it's really caught on, not from just a local perspective, but nationally as well. And so
completely agree. I want with signing day tomorrow, really want to give the listeners a take on what it's like inside of a war room on National Signing Day. Of course, you've been through a few of them, so you know what it's like. Give us your perspective and your take on what the coaches are feeling, what the assistants are. I mean, you guys excited? Is there a little bit of nervousness on if all the LOIs are going to come through? Maybe a guy that y'all are working on late that's announcing that day. I mean, give us your take and your experience through your years at Texas A&M during signing day.
Sure. Well, the one I think misperception people might have about war room, at least at the collegiate level, is that not like you see on the NFL draft day. It's where they have all the scouts and some of the coaches are in this one room, and it has all the big board there. But at least at A&M wasn't really like that. It wasn't as formal of a deal, because during the draft, I mean, you're there for a few days, basing your picks off of the previous team's pick, and so that's more involved. Here at sign day, at least you have a good idea of who's committed, who's firmly committed, and you usually have 1 to 2 guys that are on the fence, and so basically what we did was to have most of the recruiting staff and a few some of the coaches would be around in this just kind of open, like we had an open lobby in the Bright complex, and we'd have all the names of all of our commits on the board, and then we'd have a couple other guys that were on the fence, and then we just, as soon as they would get the fax, which is amazing, we still use faxes to get those LOIs, and we got those, and we would cross the name off when we get them, and so it was not a really formal thing, but it was, I think the biggest emotion that you have is a sense of relief, and because you're going right when the bowl game ends, you have a few days off, you have the coaches convention, and then you go right back to recruiting, and that's for 2 or 3 weeks, and that was just, as the coaches and the recruiting staff, you're just worn out. You're on the road, you're looking at new guys, you're doing in-home visits, doing official visits, so it's a long process, and so it's a good relief. A little bit of nervousness, especially when the guys are on the fence, that you're not sure what's going on. There are some phone calls that are being made during signing day. I remember a couple businesses. My first signing day at A&M was the unfortunate flip of Corey Nelson. Yep. Yeah. And that was definitely interesting wake-up call. I was only working there for about a month and a half, and I was like, oh man, this is not good. But it was an interesting wake-up call, and you always got to make sure that it's never over until it's over. And so, as I'm sure the listeners remember, he was committed to us for around 4 or 5 months, and then all of a sudden, the day of signing day, he decided to go to OU, and so it was definitely a blow. But then, the next year, we get a guy like Floyd Raven, who was kind of all over. We're not sure where he wanted to go, and then he committed to us the day of signing day. So that was
sent 2 LOIs in. Remember that whole saga with his mom?
Yeah, that was an interesting deal. He supposedly his mother sent an LOI to Mississippi or Ole Miss, I believe, and then he sent his to A&M, and it was a weird deal. And so I'm glad that all worked out. And I think the biggest feeling though is really just a sense of relief and like just glad it's over.
No doubt, and as we've seen now with Coach Sumlin actually getting hands-on approach and hitting the road and stuff, I wanted to kind of segue into, what you've seen from Coach Sumlin's approach to recruiting as compared to Coach Sherman's. Obviously, you didn't get to really live with Coach Sumlin in the war room at Bright Complex and really get to know his philosophy from an outside perspective, from a guy that's actually worked there and been involved before in the recruiting process. In your best opinion, compare the way things are run right now under Coach Sumlin and the things that he's doing compared to maybe Coach Sherman, and what's made maybe Kevin Sumlin so successful here in this first couple years at Texas A&M.
Sure. Well, I got to work with Coach Sumlin for about a month and a half, I believe, and I tell you what, he's a phenomenal person. Really has a great personality. This might sound silly, but he's a really great smile. And it's just, I remember going when my brother Connor was being recruited by many schools around the country. I went to a couple of them. I went to OU and the UT for his visit. And I remember Mac Brown in his office, and he's like, just a really big deal. It's like, just, how's his personality? I mean, does he smile well? I mean, all that kind of stuff. And he took that to account, which I thought was very interesting. But Kevin Sumlin, I think, has a very intoxicating personality that people gravitate towards him. And so I think, when a player comes in and he gets that warm feeling of, he's glad to see him. I think that's a great thing. I mean, he's just a guy that really, is great with kids, great with parents, and I really do respect him for, just for all that kind of stuff. And I think he does a great job of just kind of being able to relate. He's a relatively younger guy, and kind of relate to some of the kids, and I think it's worked out well. I mean, in comparison, from Coach Sherman, I thought Coach Sherman was a great evaluator. I wasn't there long enough to experience what Coach Sumlin as an evaluator is, so I can't speak to that. But as far as Coach Sherman, he was a guy that didn't really care about how many stars he had on Rivals or 247 Sports. I mean, it didn't really matter. It was a guy. I mean, he fit our system, and he was really big into looking at the whole picture, looking on and off the field type of things. And I was going through last night these kind of guys that he saw that weren't really list guys, that were just under the radar guys that really turned out to be really great players, like Terrence Frederick. I mean, he had really no offers from Katy High School. Spencer Neely, Sean Porter was not really a highly recruited player. Brian Swope, I think his biggest offer was like from SMU. Jarvis Harrison, I mean, kid had no one signed him on signing day, and he turned out to be a phenomenal player. He'd probably be a first, second round pick in the NFL draft next year. Montre Moore's not really a big signing guy. I mean, he had a late offer from Nebraska, but that's really the second biggest offer they had. And then obviously Johnny and Mike Evans were huge finds, as well as Shazer Everett and Howard Matthews. So I think he was great at finding players that, he saw something in them that, other schools might not have. And I think he was great at, getting the most out of players. And so, but I think the one thing, that Coach Sumlin does, he's a lot of energy, a lot of just fire. I think he really, getting that swag helicopter, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, the swag.
Going there, I think that's a really cool deal. I think players like that, and going there on a Thursday or Friday night to see a game, I think is a big deal. I remember the Cole Stewart going to St. Pius and laying on there in the baseball field. Like, wow, that'd be pretty cool if I was a recruit, and the head coach sliding the helicopter.
They were playing Sealy that day, so they were there to see Ricky Seals as well.
Oh, was it really? Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, so you got two players in that. But, yeah, I mean, both I think were, Coach Sherman was great with kids as well. I remember when, he'd have players come in, they walked away always with great experience from Coach Sherman. I thought he did a great job with communicating to players and to parents. So I mean, they're both good recruiters. Kevin Sumlin, I think, is just he's a guy that really can relate well to kids, and brings a lot of energy and a lot of passion. And I think when you move to the SEC, and you have these facility upgrades, it's also a huge help. And so, and you have a guy like Johnny, and that's on the national spotlight, whether it be on and off the field. But yet, A&M is getting publicity. I think that's a huge change from when I first came to A&M in 2005, where we didn't have any publicity from a national standpoint. And now, I mean, almost every month someone's talking about A&M, talking about Johnny or where the program is heading. And so I think it's a very exciting time right now in A&M sports.
No doubt. I completely agree, Jeff. There's always that topic that I've always wanted to really get to in terms of, how coaches do their evaluations. You hit on the way Coach Sherman did things with the checks and balances, but how much do they really do look at 24/7 Sports, Rivals, Scout Lists, ESPN? You see Coach Sumlin right now, wanting to get the number one guy in Dallas and Houston and East Texas and go national. He's went and got Kyle Allen from Arizona, went and got Speedy Knoll, all talented guys. I mean, they would be ranked number one, by any service. But how much do you guys really go down those lists and recruit off of that? Because when Coach Sumlin gets up on the podium, he's probably going to give a bunch of coach speak about not caring about stars. But there's definitely a perception deal going on with how your program's recruiting, and that actually having a positive effect on it.
Yeah, that's a good question. The coaches would definitely, look at lists just in case. I mean, there's so many players, especially in the state of Texas, that maybe one or two guys that might go just under our radar, just because there's so many players. And so, I think it's always great to check lists, and that I believe, I can't say with certainty, but I do believe that almost every school goes off lists, and just to make sure that, hey, who's this guy? Where's he from? I mean, and look at their tape. But we don't. I mean, for me, I think it was a good. When I was there, it was a good just benchmark, just to make, hey, are we missing something on this guy? Are we not? Is he overrated, underrated? But it was a good way just to make sure that we had everybody crossed off and made sure we were they were evaluated. And so we would, as a staff, we would always do our own evaluations. We would never just say, hey, he's a 5-star rating by 247 or Rivals. We used to offer him. We'd always do our due diligence and make sure that it's got to fit our system and would work out well with us. And so, I think one thing, kind of going back to the previous question real quick, I think is the important point is that toward the end of, or I guess middle part of when I was working there, we really started to hit Louisiana really hard, and we were like, before Coach Sherman was let go, we were going to put a fourth recruiter in the state of Louisiana, because we did a study that Louisiana has the most NFL players per capita in the union. And so, I think what Coach Sumlin's doing right now, I think he's really making a great strides within the state of Louisiana and getting some players from there. And I think that's just a great deal to have. And so, but going back, the list, I mean, I think it's always important is to look at those and make sure that everything's going the right way. I think there's one guy that was always that when I first started working there was one guy that was a big lift guy. I probably won't say his name, but he was an offensive lineman and from the Houston area, and he signed eventually with Texas. And they're like, this guy we don't see it. I mean, this guy he walked in the door, and you're like, oh my gosh, this guy is, 6'5", 6'6". I mean, he passed the eyeball test, and it was just we watched the tape, and it was not there, and he was had to pass, but he had offers from Oklahoma, Nebraska, and a few other major universities that we decided to pass, and I think that was a great decision that we made, and I don't think he's done that much since. So
I think you're talking about the kid from Pearland Dawson, right? The offensive tackle?
I'm actually talking, where is he from? He's from Garrett, Greenlee.
Oh, yes. I remember him. Yep.
And so that was, I think that was a good deal. We didn't go after him, and I thought Coach Sherman was really great at looking, especially evaluating the offensive line talent.
No doubt. Of course, with you being a quarterback, cannot not ask you a Johnny Manziel question. You went through that whole recruitment with Coach Sherman and Coach Rossley. We know Brett Hundley was basically y'all's number one guy. You had some other targets mixed in there, but take us through that whole recruitment as you remember it. I mean, was he a guy that some Coach Rossi in there, was he basically fighting for him the entire time, or was it who was apprehensive? What were the discussions like over Johnny Manziel when his name brought up?
Sure. Well, going back to their junior year, we had guy. Steve Craigthorpe was there. He just got there, and he was kind of in charge of the West Texas, Arizona, and a couple of regions in Texas. But he was one of the first guys to really recruit Brett Hundley, and I think he did a great job there. I thought he was definitely our first pick just because of the size, from just an arm strength, the speed. I mean, he was a great-looking player. And actually, the guy who found him initially was a guy I believe is still working at A&M, Michael LaGrasta. And so he was, I think, the first guy to actually point him out. But, we had on the big board, really, it was Brett and Trevor Knight and Johnny Manziel were the top three guys. And so, going into it, Brett was our number one guy, and there was split between Johnny and Brett. Johnny and Trevor. And Brett was definitely a long shot, coming from a different state, but his grandmother was from Houston, so we thought we had a fighting chance. And so, but once he decided to go to UCLA, we decided to go with Trevor Knight. The reason why was Trevor was probably a little bit more refined as far as a passer goes, as a pocket passer. I thought we just thought you had a little bit better feet. The things that we looked at from a quarterback standpoint, and Coach Rossley, was we looked at first how their feet. I mean, are they mobile? Can they make a couple first downs a game? Are they nimble? Accuracy, arm strength, and then two other ones that is he a winner? And can he win games? And the last one is probably a unique one, is does he have what we call a magic factor? And what we mean by that is, can he do things that can he overcome the coaching sometimes? And what I mean by that is that, whoever coaches, it could be Bill Belichick for the New England Patriots. No one's been called a perfect game. And sometimes players, you're going to be caught in a bad situation, and can they audible to another play that gets them out of that situation, or can he just do something with his legs or his arm that just defies, just defies what you normally think about football? Is can he make those unbelievable plays? Can he send those tight spots? And so Johnny, I mean, watching him, he had that magic factor and that winner mentality. And, we decided to go with Trevor first just because of just the feet, though, and the arm strength, and we thought he was just a little bit more refined for what we were doing at that time with Coach Sherman is more of a drop back type of passer. And when we still stayed on Johnny, though, pretty hard throughout the recruiting process, because Coach Walsley, his recruiting area was San Antonio, and he was always like, hey, look at these stats, the junior year. Going into the senior year now, we're going, I believe at this time, Trevor decommits and commits to OU, I think pretty early, like either late summer or early in the fall of the senior season. And so we started really watching Johnny, and he came for a visit. I mean, we liked him. He was, size was good, and without question, is he 5'10", is he 5'11", but he was 6 foot, and so, and then we started watching his games, and it was just like, wow. I mean, one of my jobs was Saturday morning before our football games is that I would go at like 6 a.m. in the morning and go get all the stats from all the recruits that we were eyeing, and I'd present them before the game on Monday or Saturday morning meeting and say, hey, here's how this guy did, here's how this guy did. And it was always the easiest. Johnny was always the first one to be mentioned, and it would always be 7 touchdowns, 6 touchdowns. He only played 3/4 of the game. I mean, we played half of the game because they were up so much. I mean, he stuck out on the kickoff return of the first play of the game and scored a touchdown. Now the coaches know it. And I mean, we were just like in awe of the stats. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And they would be dropping the opposing defense would be dropping 8 players in the coverage, and Johnny would still find the guy open or he'd run for 20 yards. I mean, it was amazing. And we never saw anything like it, and we were very happy and blessed that we were able to flip Johnny from Morgan. And now, always the question is, did we all know that it was going to be like that? Like, Johnny's going to perform like that? I mean, to be completely honest, I don't think anybody ever thought Johnny was going to be Heisman Trophy winner his redshirt freshman year. I mean, that was what he has done has been unbelievable, and very, very happy for him that he's done a lot of hard work and paid off. And so, but it was, I think, when Kevin Sumlin came and instilled his type of offense, which was basically the same offense that he had at Kerrville Ivy, I think really helped him out. It kind of reduced the playbook size, reduced the amount of audibles and checks, and made him just play football. And so I think that was a great lesson for him that Kevin Sumlin could bring in the type of offense that he ran in high school and play to his strengths. And so, I thought it was a great deal for him, and it really worked out well. So
Are you seeing a trend? Sorry, there, Jeff, but are you seeing a trend in at the quarterback position? I look at guys that Texas A&M is recruiting right now in the 2015 class, and Kyler Murray, who reminds me so much of Johnny Manziel, but the knock on him is height. And you see a guy like Russell Wilson win a Super Bowl. I mean, our offenses are now starting to adapt to smaller, more mobile quarterbacks, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's, especially in college, you can get away with that more. I think the NFL is still going to be a while. I mean, the amount of the beating that you can take as a quarterback in the NFL, you can't, and the stuff that you can do as a quarterback in college, you really can't do that very much in the NFL. Russell Wilson made some great plays with his feet, and so did Colin Kaepernick in the year before Super Bowl with his feet. But I think for the long term, I mean, you're not going to see a guy that's going to be able to stand running the ball and doing the things that they can do in college in the NFL because everyone's faster, everyone's bigger, everyone's stronger, and you can out-athlete people even in the college level, even in the SEC. I mean, Johnny is clearly one of the top athletes in the country. I mean, out-athlete people. But when you go to the NFL, I mean, they're the best of the best. And so, I think a guy like Robert Griffin, he's had his fair share of bruises and bumps, and it's like, it's been not the easiest road for him. And so, and a guy like Michael Vick, who's been hurt many times throughout his career, trying to run, and so, the one thing that Johnny does so well is that he extends plays. Especially when he's running in the field, he can juke, he can spin, he can kind of shut out blocks. But in the NFL, he won't be able to do that very much. He's going to be taught to slide. There's not going to be any more of the he splits two defenders type of thing. I mean, he can take a couple of hits from those guys and I'm going to start sliding now. And so, as a great athlete he is, I think he's going to keep on working with his pocket awareness, his pocket presence. But, he's a hard worker. I mean, I remember him, his freshman year. He's a tough guy. He's a hard worker. So I think, it's going to be a little bit of adjustment for him, but I think it's going to be, he can do it. So,
Finally.
But I think his overall, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I think the overall trend, though, kind of going back to your point, is that, yes, I think colleges can get away with it more. I think they can do the option, the spread option, and have a smaller guy. But translating to the NFL, I mean, with corners and safeties like this, if you saw the Seahawks, defensive backfield, I mean, you're going to have a strong arm, a cannon to really get to those tight windows and to be able to look, 6'5", 6'6" offensive linemen. It's harder for guys that are 6 foot, but I mean, the Drew Breeses and those guys of the world. I mean, they can do it, but I think it's going to take a little bit longer for the NFL to fully adjust.
Great, Jeff. I know we had talked a little bit last night about what we were going to discuss in this podcast. Is there any unique things that we didn't touch on that could provide the listeners some good perspective from your standpoint about just the ins and outs of recruiting, maybe some personal experiences or such?
Well, sure. I mean, would you like to talk about just kind of the official days versus the junior days? Would that be something? Yeah,
junior days. A lot of people like to know just the format, how things are handled by the staff. You got a lot of kids in there, a lot of big time names, and they all need attention.
Yeah, sure. Well, first the junior days, it was interesting. Universities, when I was getting recruited back in 2003 and 2004, you would never see universities really offering players until really the beginning of their senior year. And they're really good. I mean, they'd offer the really good ones sometimes in their junior year, but it's very much of a rarity. Now, I think when you speed things so far up. I mean, now you're offering kids as freshmen or sophomores, and it's really becoming an arms race. But I think one of the main reasons for that was the University of Texas. And what they would do during their junior days is that they'd have 2 junior days after National Signing Day. And they would really get whoever they wanted from the state of Texas and Oklahoma. And then the rest of the schools like LSU, A&M, and TCU, Baylor would just kind of have whatever was left after UT. And so what we started doing was we started offering kids earlier, and to try to combat that when UT would have these these very elite junior days. And so we always tell them, hey, listen, we've been with you since your sophomore year. We want you. I mean, we've offered you, and trying to find some type of competitive advantage, really. And so, so in the junior days, we bring them up, and sometimes they've been there for games. The coaches have been there for games, and maybe just for an official visit, just to see the coaches. But for a junior day, though, for what A&M was, we had one day that's kind of what we would say is our invite-only day, and then we had one that was kind of more of a general junior day. And so the invite-only day is like we have like the Jonathan Grays of the world, the Caleb Joneses, we have Johnny Manziel, all those guys come in, and we would have we would go through kind of what A&M is all about. Some of these kids have never really heard what A&M is, what they're known for, what traditions are. We would go through, almost everything from A to Z. We go through academics. We go through nutrition. We go through a training room staff. We talk about just the importance of finishing out your high school career, making sure that you're doing all the right things from on and off field in high school, and also you would also meet with the coaches one-on-one and get to know them on a deeper level. And so those junior days were a great way to really kind of introduce A&M from an in-depth standpoint. And you get to meet all the staff and really kind of get to know them on a great, just like a friendly basis. And so it wasn't just someone on the other end of the phone or the other end of a Facebook email. So, and then really the official visits were more of like it was a day to really get to further, help those players say, hey, this is what we think of you, like, being here, this is what we'll see your role as. It's a little more refined. We show them off campus, what's really unique about A&M is that we allow our student athletes to stay off campus and in apartments. And so some universities like UT, they make them stay on campus. And so that's a competitive advantage that we have over UT. And we show them the dorm, the apartments. We show them just kind of around town, because during junior days we're not allowed to take them off campus. And so, but for the official visits, we have 48 hours to give them whatever kind of is around the city of College Station and Bryan. Here's where you'd be living, here's what you'd be doing, and really getting to know the players as well. And that's one of the key things about the official visits, is that you could go hang out with some of the guys on the team and really spend time with them and get to know them. So the junior days is more like getting to know the coaches on a more in-depth relationship, and then the official visits is kind of really putting the icing on the cake, I guess, and really, hey, we see you sitting here. Here's our players that we currently have. I think you'd be a great fit, and really try to make the players comfortable as you can. Hey, this is where you can spend the next 4 or 5 years of your life. And so,
well, Jeff, that's great. I'm going to leave you with, just want to get your comments on, when you hear about A&M signing the #1 quarterback in the country, #1 defensive end, #1 wide receiver, and having a top 3 class right now. What does that say about the direction of this program, and how do you feel about them sustaining that success moving forward?
I think it's an exciting time right now in Aggie land. I mean, there's never been so much hype. Being there for 7 years, from 2005 to 2012, and being a player as well as an assistant coach. I mean, it's exciting. I mean, you see people in Houston, where I live now, you see people wearing A&M gear all the time. It's really cool to see that, and you always see people just wearing UT just because UT was kind of a cool thing back then. But now, really, A&M has kind of superseded them, and really, I think there's a true excitement. And I mean, having the SEC, having the new stadium being built, I think now really the administration is fully on board, and I think Kevin Sumlin has done a phenomenal job. Being working well with the administration and telling them of his thoughts and his ideas, I think, and they've seemed like they have really responded well to him. And I mean, it's a really cool thing to see all these recruits coming in. I think the Kyle Allen kid is going to be a special player, but I really think that it's going to be a great battle this spring between the Kenny Hill and and Kyle Allen. I mean, yes, Kyle Allen's the number one player in the country, but Kenny Hill's has had a year and a half of experience in the system, being in college and playing in national games, which really is a huge, huge benefit to have. And so I think it's going to be a great battle going forward, and can't wait to see who's going to come up and see who's going to come up victorious in that battle. So exciting days coming up in that UN for sure.
Is this the way, when you were there, you pretty much pictured it should be? I mean, for the longest time, we're looking around and going, okay, we have all these great facilities, great tradition. Why aren't we recruiting better? Why aren't we winning more games? Is it now to that point to where, all right, this is how it should have been?
Well, I think there was, honestly, this is a true story that, when we were, it was like in the late 90s, and when Mac Brown came to Texas, and then they started, really then we started the war of the facilities, upgrades. And they built their facility, which is still state-of-the-art, in my opinion. I mean, going there with my brother and seeing, the first thing that you walk into when you're a recruit going to Texas is the trophy room. And when you open the door, you see the crystal balls and the Heisman. That's the very first thing you see. And so that's like, right when you go in there, I'm like, wow, you see, as a recruit, you say, this is a program that wins, and I can win awards, and we will go to the NFL type of thing. And so that was kind of like the first, starting of the, getting facilities. And we were, as an A&M, we were really late to that. I'm sure a lot of people, listeners know, especially the older listeners, know that we were very far behind initially with getting the Bright football complex going. Also, I think we were a few years late of getting the stadium being rebuilt, and so I think that was a little bit overdue, but I'm glad they're doing it now. But I think it was always, to me, yes, you always wanted the recruiting like this, but I think when Coach Sherman came, he was put in a little bit of a hard position from just like a player standpoint. We had, if you remember, after the 2007 season, we had Kirk Elder leave, graduate. We had Cody Walls graduate, and a few other guys. Jimmy Babalola got in trouble. So basically the entire offensive line, besides one guy, left due to graduation or due to off-the-field issues. And we just didn't have a strong supporting cast when he first got there. And so it's kind of a little bit of rebuild mode. And I think it took a couple years to really kind of get, Coach Sherman's guys in there, get a great offensive line established, get a great quarterback there, and some receivers like a Jeff Fuller and Ryan Swope to really help rebuild the program. And so, it's so hard to do things overnight. It's not like the NFL where you can cut players on a whim and go get get some free agents or picks guys in the draft. And so I think the NFL is a much quicker turnaround in terms of making things better from a win perspective than college. College, you go get two phenomenal classes in a row. But you got to realize that these kids are 17, 18, 19 years old. We're not ready to compete against those, the 21, 22-year-old players in the SEC. They're just not physically mature enough. So you got to wait a couple of years before those guys get a little older, and so they can, then they can compete in those games. And so, it was but to really answer your question, yes, I think this is how it should be, is how A&M should always recruit. And so I think A&M has a great product that they offer kids from just not from a football standpoint, just from an academic standpoint, from a networking standpoint, from traditions. I think A&M has tons and tons of things to offer potential recruits.
Jeff, we can't thank you enough for spending a good 40-plus minutes with us, really breaking down everything, your experience, what it's like, inside a war room, and everything else we touched on, man. Best of luck to you finishing up at U of H. Hope to hear back from you soon, my man.
Thanks, I appreciate it. Have a good day.
Next up on our pre-signing day podcast, we've got Director of National Recruiting for 24/7 Sports, J.C. Shurburtt. All right, well, next up on the GigEm247 National Signing Day podcast, I'm bringing in the man, J.C. Shurburtt, our Director of National Recruiting for 24/7 Sports. J.C., what's going on with you, man?
Hey, Taylor, it's good to be on the podcast out there in Aggie Land, man.
Good stuff, man. We're going to get right into it, JC. We've had some really great guests on. I'm excited about hearing your take on this Texas A&M class right now, which, you know, we're still a day out from signing day, still sitting in that, I think, number 5 spot in the 24/7 Sports team rankings. Your take on what Kevin Sumlin's been able to put together so far. You got the number 1 overall player in Myles Garrett. You got the number 1 quarterback in the country in Kyle Allen, of course, number 1 wide receiver in Speedy Noyle. Really the highlights of this class, but really wanted to get your personal take as someone that's been in this business for a while, and you've seen a lot of good classes been put together. How would you rate Texas A&M's class this year?
It's an outstanding class. You know, just for my personal preference, you know, I think if I were, you know, just looking at a class and saw the number 1 quarterback, number 1 receiver, and number 1 defensive end, all were in the same class. I mean, that's one that I would want to take. Those are all 3 high position value spots, especially quarterback and end. I mean, I don't get much better than that. You know, and I think that those guys deservedly get the praise, and that's the big storyline, Taylor, is that, you know, Texas A&M, you know, it's one thing to get a Myles Garrett, top player in Texas, but it's another thing to go into Louisiana and get the number 1 receiver in the country, and go into Arizona and get the number 1 quarterback in the country. I mean, that's kind of a testament to Texas A&M's recruiting reach expanding. I think that they've done an excellent job. I mean, the transition into the SEC has been about as good as it could possibly get. You know, with a Heisman winner and all the momentum they built by winning in Tuscaloosa last year, then they had a pretty good season this year. Yeah, sometimes in recruiting, it's about folks talking about you having kind of a spotlight on you, and Texas A&M's had that, and that allows recruits to come and be interested in what you have to offer as a school. You know, once they get on campus, it's one of the top 4 atmospheres as far as stadiums go in the SEC. It's a great university. College Station's a good college town. There's a lot of tradition. You know, there's all the things that major programs sell. You know, sometimes, though, it takes that good season or that momentum or that national spotlight to sort of get, you know, guys to take you seriously in terms of coming on multiple visits and building the relationships necessary for you to land them. And Kevin Sumlin and company certainly have done that. You know, so I think all that stuff with regards to the A&M class is going to get deserved headlines. What I think may get lost is Texas A&M's got 2 of the best JUCO offensive tackles in the country heading in. Avery Genesee and Jermaine Illuminor. I think that's how you pronounce it. And given the loss of the offensive linemen that they've had, I mean, these guys were kind of, I guess, understated, big, huge pickups. and really, they went and beat a division rival in Arkansas for Jermaine, and beat a division rival in Ole Miss for Avery. So that's saying something right there. When you can go and beat the teams you're supposed to beat on players, you know, 9 times out of 10, that leads to success. So I really like that about this class, too.
And you touched on it briefly, but I think that something that a little bit goes overlooked is the reach at which Texas A&M is recruiting right now to go to Arizona, take, you know, not only the top quarterback in the country, but land him, and then a guy, in my opinion, that's a little bit overlooked in the class too, in Quaylen Cunningham, maybe the number 1, and depending on how you look at it, 2 or 3rd ranked prospect in the state of Arizona. And then to go to Louisiana, like you said, steal a guy like Speedy Noyle, as well as the 2 JUCOs who they fought, pretty good battle with the internal SEC rivals. So maybe just speak on the reach and how much that says about a staff's recruiting ability, in your expert opinion, seeing some of the best do it, the Alabamas and the USCs and the Floridas and, and so on that do cover national recruiting and their scope is so wide.
Yeah, I think it shows that, A&M has a broader reach than it once did. The school's located within the state of Texas, Taylor. I don't think they're ever going to go out of state for more than 20 to 25% of their players. Just because the high school football is so good there. You get guys out of Texas, if you recruit Texas high schools, that aren't necessarily your high ceiling upside guys. Like, you'll find a kid down at 46'7", 225, played high school basketball, maybe like a half year of football, and then he goes and he lifts weights and he gets on the training table, and he's a 6'7", 270-pound pass rusher in the NFL. And there's guys like that all over the place. In the state of Texas, though, the high school football is so good that guy that's 6'7", 210 and extremely raw, he's already going to be 6'7", 240 or so by the time he gets to be a senior, just because that's the way those programs are structured. So what you do is you give up some of the developmental upside, and you get a lot of guys that can just straight up play. And so for that reason, the Texas schools, I don't think, will ever go out of state for a whole lot. That being said, sometimes you need to go get a receiver. You need to go get two JUCO offensive tackles. If you've got a legacy sitting out in Arizona that's a great pass rusher, go get him, and then go get his neighbor who happens to be the #1 quarterback in the country. That kind of thing, I think, that's what helps. I mean, it's the ability to supplement the talent that you're already getting with even greater talent. And A&M certainly with this class has shown it can do that. Moving forward, you don't really know. Nobody really knows what's going to happen within the state of Texas with Texas hiring a new coaching staff and things of that nature. And Baylor seems to be doing well. There's TCU and all these other schools, Texas Tech, that recruit the state. But it makes it less imperative if you have a guy. Let's see, we all remember Michael Crabtree. Let's say Michael Crabtree decides he's going to get Texas Tech and play receiver. And he's a great player, and you hate to lose him. But when he walks, instead of you having to go to plan B or C within the state, if you have that reach, you can go to New Orleans or go to Arizona or go to California and get a guy that, has got that kind of upside and is right on par with the guy you may have lost. So I think that's why reach is important. I think it's a direct, the direct reason is, the season they had when Manziel won the Heisman, and then last year the spotlight that was always on the program, I think that facilitates things like that.
No doubt. I want to talk specifics about some of these players that highlight this class. Myles Garrett, the big decision you guys made as part of that national recruiting group, obviously comprised of you and Barton and Steve and the rest of the clan. What went into the decision to put Myles Garrett as the #1 overall prospect and to leap a guy that the industry says and Leonard Fournette is the #1 prospect? What made y'all kind of go in a way against the grain there?
Well, it comes down to how we do our rankings, and our 24/7 Sports rankings we try to project at the next level and beyond. And the reason we do that is if you use draft data and NFL scouting preferences and things like that, if this guy's 6'1.5", he's a tight end, and he's an equal, playing level and upside and athleticism as this kid over here that's 6'4", that's how you know to take the 6'4" guy, because the NFL is going to take the 6'4" guy. And the position value, and that gets down to the reason we did not have Fournette #1. Running backs nowadays, no matter how good you are, unless you're Adrian Peterson, and he has been compared to that. But you're not, your shelf life is very, very short. GMs aren't investing a whole lot of time. And in college football, you'll see 2 or 3 running backs get hurt, and the team's rushing yardage increases. So, the days of the great tailback, while still alive in places like Georgia, I think are falling by the wayside. So I think that's why that happens.
What did you see from Kyle Allen at, Elite 11 and even this summer at the opening that really points him in the direction of being, a guy that could potentially be the next great quarterback that comes through Texas A&M and earn that 5-star rating?
Well, there's two things. First of all, every time I saw Kyle Allen, he got better. Saw him at a school last spring, saw him back, I guess, in the summer when he had grown an inch. Saw him again. He had grown another half inch. Saw him again at the opening, and he looked like a mature quarterback, and then saw him again at the Army Bowl where he just looked lights out. And I think here's the thing about it is that, we all know, like, someone had a mobile quarterback and Johnny Manziel, and they ran the ball at the quarterback and things like that. But if you look at someone's history, a lot of it's, there's a lot of passing, a lot of heavy passing. And a guy like Kyle Allen combined with the receivers Texas A&M recruited, I mean, that could be a lethal passing game moving forward, especially if Kyle is as accurate of a passer as we think he is and as he's shown us. You combine that with all the receivers Texas A&M's got, you have the makings of a sort of a pass-happy offensive attack.
Is there one guy in this class that they're about to sign on Wednesday that you feel like maybe is a little underrated, or a guy that you really like that maybe doesn't capture as much of the headlines as those big three?
Well, I really think that Olaka, the linebacker from down in Houston, that they flipped from Texas, is a potential big time, fill out your frame, lengthy linebacker type that'll do big things. I think at Texas A&M, he'll just have to develop for a couple of years. But I really liked him, and I think that the rest of the class is very solid as well.
Finally, JC, we'll leave you with this. Moving forward, they have the number 1 ranked 2015 class right now. It's still early on, but, do you feel like Coach Sumlin and his approach, he's doing something that, is able, going to be able to sustain this type of success? Obviously, wins and losses determine a lot of that, but is there something about his approach that you see that maybe standing out to you as someone that's been in the business for a while?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that strikes me like Coach Sumlin is the way he can, develop relationships with his players and his fellow coaches, people like working for him. I think he's the type of guy that's calm during the storm, from what I've seen him on the sideline. And, that's leadership. Leadership doesn't always going crazy and throwing things and yelling at your team. Sometimes it's that steadying presence that really helps, when you're coaching football or trying to play football. So all those things sort of stand out to me. I mean, I think that, given his laid-back demeanor and given who he is and the success that he's had, in the living room when he's recruiting, that all has to be appealing, and he's got a great bunch of assistants to go help him. And so, yes, I think the success. I think they've recruited too well for the success not to sustain. I mean, if take a dip next year, your guess is as good as mine, because sometimes teams do, sometimes they don't. But I think right now, just looking at it from a talent acquisition and roster standpoint, that A&M's definitely here to stay, out there in the toughest division in college football.
I'm going to throw one more at you real quick that I meant to ask you is the turnaround in the state of Texas. Have you seen anything like that before? I mean, the state of Texas is unique in its own sense, just because of the battles that go on between, obviously Texas and Texas A&M, but you add in TCU and Baylor and Tech, and then all the schools that come and cherry pick that have been, historically good in the state, the Oklahomas, the LSUs, even the Alabamas and such. So, but to see Coach Sumlin pretty much flip this script in such a short amount of time, I mean, did you really foresee this coming? And is this something that you felt like they could do in this short amount of time?
No, I mean, I felt like there would be probably some adjustment for A&M and Missouri both, and both have actually made some noise the first 2 years. And I thought it would come on the defensive side of the ball. I thought that, A&M would be able to move it, but, they'd have a few years to have to recruit to get to a high-level, SEC, quote-unquote SEC defense. And A&M's defense was not very good this past year. So because of that, I thought that there probably wouldn't be the seasons that they've had. Maybe a season like this past season would be best case scenario, but winning the Heisman, winning 11, winning the Cotton Bowl, beating Alabama and Tuscaloosa for the first time since they've met and forever. All those things, show that it is heading in the right direction, and that someone's facilitating good recruiting by doing those types of things. And, all the returns from A&M's junior day, last week that I read were overwhelmingly positive. And, so I think as good as this A&M class is this year, that next year it could be, could be tremendous. I think certainly Texas is going to be more formidable as far as, having a new staff and having that kind of momentum. But, A&M right now is the top dog, and I think they're the more popular choice.
JC, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us on a busy week. Appreciate your insight.
Hey, no problem, buddy. Take care.
Our final guest on this special GigEm247 Pre-Signing Day podcast is going to be Shreveport Woodlawn head coach Jerwin Wilson. All right, well, next up on the GigEm247 National Signing Day podcast, we're bringing in Coach Wilson. He's a head coach at Shreveport Woodlawn. Of course, he is the head coach of Texas A&M's most recent commitment in Jerwin Wilson. Coach, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on and talking with us today.
All right, thanks for having me.
No problem. Coach, we're just going to dive right into it. I definitely want to get your take on Donovan is a player, a guy that, in my opinion, is extremely underrated by most recruiting services. You watch him on film, played both sides of the ball extremely well, led the state of Louisiana in interceptions with 13, caught over 80 passes on the offensive side, great ball skills. Does a lot for you guys at your program. If you could just kind of dive into his abilities on the football field and what he's going to bring to the table at Texas A&M.
Oh man, you hit the nail on the head when you said he's underrated. He's a kid that's worked extremely hard since he came into our program. Came on as a sophomore and kind of just improved as the years went on. And like you said, 13 interceptions. But the most important part about Donovan, he's a great kid. He works hard every day and, just wants to know what he needs to do to get better. And if he keeps that type of attitude, who knows where he'll end up.
What is he, in your opinion, going to do to the Texas A&M secondary as as an upgrade? That's a position where right now that it's up for grabs with some of the guys on campus, and with him being a guy that really has immeasurables, is 6'1", close to 190 pounds already. Do you see him coming in, maybe being able to compete for that starting spot?
Well, at the end of the day, he's going to compete his tail off, but all he can ask for is opportunity, and that's what obviously he'll get. Coach Joe, obviously all those guys, they're going to play the best guy, but if somebody's out there better than Donovan, of course, that's only going to make Texas A&M better. I just wish them the best, but he's a player that's going to, work his tail off. He's going to push everybody to get better, and all skills are pretty much, second to none in terms of, other guys that I've seen. And that's pretty much what stands out most when you put in his tape is his ball skills. And I guess that comes from playing both sides of the ball.
When you talk about his recruitment, if you don't mind, obviously things started to heat up these last couple of weeks. He went up to Utah, had a tremendous visit. I know there was some talks on whether or not Texas A&M was going to offer. He goes and has a really good official visit to Texas A&M. I'm sure the coaching staff, probably would have liked to have him on board before he left College Station, but for one reason or another, he felt like Utah at the time was the best fit for him. Kind of just maybe take us through the past week and the whirlwind it's been for you guys.
Man, it's definitely been a roller coaster. He was committed to Utah. Those guys, man, do a great job of recruiting. Great guys up there. Coach William Hammers does a great job. Coach Stanley did a great job of recruiting him. And he was, he left the official visit. His mom wasn't there. I went along with him. And then, he kind of just wanted to have time to sit down and talk to mom. And, we left there. He was still set on Utah. And, I don't think that changed until probably about Thursday evening. And, he realized, he weighed his options, and, he called me up and said, Coach, I want to go to A&M. And so that's kind of how this thing all happened.
Maybe kind of then expound on the job that Coach Joseph and Coach Sumlin did there to really change his mind, because as you said, he was pretty set on Utah, and not a lot of people realize how serious he was about that.
Yeah, those guys did it on Wednesday morning, and whatever was said, it was resonating in his heart, because it was mind-boggling with him. And we had a talk, me, him, and Mom, Thursday. And after that time, he contacted me once everything, the dust settled or whatnot, and told me what he wanted to do. And we're just fortunate enough that everything was still on the table in terms of A&M. So.
Wonderful. Coach, maybe also just talk a little bit about, the job Texas A&M in your mind has done in Louisiana, and what Coach Joseph is going to bring to the table as the new defensive backs coach for Texas A&M. They went and stole a guy out of New Orleans in Speedy Knoll, who not a lot of people gave them credit for doing, but what are some of the attributes that you've seen from dealing with them that have maybe in your mind showed you that they can be successful in the state of Louisiana?
Well, I mean, you look at the conference that these guys play in. You look at the competition level that has definitely increased since Coach Sumlin's taken over. And me just talking with Coach Sumlin, he's very genuine, very passionate about helping kids. Every conversation that we've had has been positive. We've had several leaders since Donovan has committed, and he's always been passionate about helping kids. And Coach Joseph is a great guy, and I've known him previously, and pretty much. The recruiting is about relationships, and pretty much that's what a lot of these things come down to, is relationships with someone, whether it be already been on the staff, or somebody just coming on like Coach Joseph. So I mean, everything happens for a reason. So and definitely with Coach Joseph coming on, that was one of the reasons that Donovan was able to go to A&M.
On your visit to Texas A&M, you obviously accompanied Donovan himself, but you also brought a young 2015 corner that you have coming through the ranks as well, and Henry Black. If you could maybe elaborate on his skill set, what the coaching staff at Texas A&M feels, right now about his talents, and him possibly being a target for them down the road.
Well, I mean, Henry's a great corner. He's going to be a guy he's growing every day. That's what's so scary about it. He's growing every day. He's about 6 foot right now. Before he leaves me, with his waist, he'll probably be about 6'1.5", if not 6'2". We play a lot of man, and with that allowed Donovan to free up to get a lot of interceptions, and it doesn't jump out a lot on tape because we are playing man, and of course if the guy's covered, the ball's not going to be thrown. So they want to see him flip his hips a little more and see him in some more man coverage, of course. Because they're not able to see that on film. But he's a guy that I'm sure, when we get on this camp circuit, just like when we got Donovan out there, we won't have a problem with picking up that offer at all.
No doubt. Coach, we'll finally end with another stud that you have on your squad right now, and of course the big defensive tackle on T.D. Moten, who has gone to Twitter and been saying a lot of positive things about Texas A&M since Donovan's commitment, and the word is that they want to play together at the next level. What can you tell us about T.D. as a player, some of the things that y'all are working on with him, and maybe how he feels about Texas A&M early on.
First of all, as a player, everybody knows he's very explosive, and big guys like his size and his caliber don't come, dime a dozen. He's very flexible, and that's what we're working on him being more flexible. And I pretty much what we're trying to work on his game is for him to be an every down D tackle. Once he does that, he'll be definitely unstoppable. But he has, expressed that very, very, very often about him having been wanting to play with that, because he actually didn't get that opportunity this year. When he transferred in, he based on transfer rules, wasn't allowed to play. So, he expressed that he wants to have that opportunity to play with Donovan. So who knows?
No doubt. Well, thank you so much for the time, Coach. Best of luck to you guys next season.